Hello and welcome to today's Movers and Shakers virtual event. My name's Lee Natasha Salter and I'm Managing Director of Movers and Shakers. I hope you've all had a great week so far. Well, today is one of our UK monthly private and public recovery sessions. We're running these sessions in association with Kratos. I'm sure you all know Kratos. They're a specialist local government public affairs consultancy. So really looking forward to working with these guys through the year. These sessions are going to be every Thursday or Friday, the last week of each month, and this is our second one of these. These are going to be timely and topical sessions, so we'll be able to include ministers, shadow ministers, metro mayors, combined authority leaders, and their private sector counterparts. Now, this really fits with the mission for 2021 for Movers and Shakers, which is to drive more and better private and public sector collaboration across the industry, locally and globally. Now, today you'll all be watching this event from our community platform or indeed from our app. So we're absolutely delighted to have launched this. I think it's about 4 weeks ago now. So the community has been brought together with the idea of collaboration across the industry, sharing knowledge, sharing information, and bringing back the ability to network while we're virtual. So to be able to connect and to do business. And as we go back, hopefully at the middle of the year, to physical events, we'll have a hybrid events business. You'll be able to connect with people before going to the physical event and afterwards follow up your conversations and have fun with our knowledge centres and also our investment hub that we'll be launching shortly. So back to today. So today's session is on delivering social housing through public-private partnerships. And clearly, as we come out of this pandemic, it's going to be very difficult for local authorities to meet their social housing obligations, especially with financial constraints. So in this discussion, we're really looking at the challenges that are facing local authorities, the demand on housing associations, and how can possibly public and private collaboration produce better outcomes. We've got a superb panel today, so I'll welcome them and thank you to them for joining us. So welcome to Kate Davis, who is Chief Executive of Notting Hill Genesis, Claire Miller, who is Group Chief Executive of Clarion Housing Group, Alice Lester, MBE, who is Operational Director for Regeneration, Growth and the Environment at Brent Council, and Steve Curran, who is leader of the council, the London Borough of Hounslow. And welcome to our guest chair again, Nick Kilby, Chief Executive of Kratos. So the format today, we've got just under an hour. Nick will be speaking individually to each of our contributors for about 5 minutes to kick off, and then we'll have a main discussion, and our audience, of course, as usual, can ask questions. So do write your questions in the Q&A tab to the right of your screen. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand you in the most capable hands of Nick. So thank you and enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. My first conversation will be with Claire Miller from Clarion.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, everybody.
Claire, all of us have had amazing journeys, extraordinary times that we've had to work through. Where is Clarion today, and how's it going to be emerging from this lockdown sensation that we've all had to deal with and cope with in the last year?
So Clarion, as you know, Nick, is a very large organisation. We've got 125,000 homes across England and just under 4,000 staff. It's been an unbelievable year for my organisation as well as for many others. But I think what the pandemic has reinforced for me, if you like, is what's important about organisations like my own. And it has really reinforced the charitable mission and ethos that's at the heart of what we do. So we are known for building social housing and for managing homes and communities and neighbourhoods. And we've been around for a long time. But what I think the pandemic has absolutely reinforced is the importance not only of investing in bricks and mortars, but also in the neighbourhoods and communities where we are a significant presence. And as we start to unravel public and private partnerships later in the discussion, I think it has become very clear to me how important at a local level those partnerships are to succeed in supporting the communities that we house. It's insufficient just for any one agency to take the lead. In fact, it is the essence of success that all of us are in this together in supporting our residents.
I suppose because all of us have been reacquainting ourselves with home and our communities, that it really has brought home the whole issue of your role in the community. Has that changed the way that your staff have been working with their tenants and the community? Has there been a big change in that side? And have you found yourself being drawn into some of the issues that have come out? I know that mental health issues and people's welfare has really been drawn out in many areas.
So we've experienced on our estates what everyone has experienced, I think, but it's much more intense when you are when you have a concentration of homes in a particular neighbourhood or a particular community. Antisocial behaviour has been a significant factor that we've had to deal with at scale. In our neighbourhoods. Domestic violence, absolutely. We run the domestic violence services for the whole of Kent. And so we've had a graphic insight into exactly the challenges that are being faced in that one local authority area, but I am very well aware that it's a national issue. I think for Clarion, one of the things that's always been important for us is the work that we do to help our residents into employment. Routinely, we get about 4,000 people a year into work. It has never been so important for us to fund that type of work, to support residents to maintain their employment in a very tricky labour market. Has been a top priority for us over the last 12 months and will continue to be so.
Oh, that's great, because it actually is going to be one of the issues that we're all going to have to face in this post-lockdown climate. In between all of the things that's brought, how have you done on delivering housing? Because that need hasn't stopped, has it? That hasn't gone away.
It hasn't, absolutely. This year we'll deliver around about 2,000 homes. It would have been more than that, but like everybody else, we've had delays on site, particularly during the first lockdown, and so that knocked us back, I would say, about 6 months. Our appetite and ambition to invest in new homes is undiminished, but as you will know, housing associations are under cost pressure from a number of different fronts, not least supporting our residents, but also fire remediation work, dealing with cladding and all sorts of other things, particularly on our horizon at the moment, the journey towards carbon neutral. So lots of calls on our resources, but nonetheless, housing people in housing need is fundamentally what we do. Yeah,
and amazing. Your role in Kent, I didn't know. So that was quite an eye-opener when you said that. Amazing. Geographically, how much of the country do you cover now?
We're in 170 different local authority areas, and we house just over 360,000 people in our homes.
Well, that's 50% of the local government in this country. So that's an amazing coverage. If you had one thought, a cheerful thought about going forward, what do you feel the most optimistic about in the next few months?
I think my staff have outperformed my expectations of them from the very start, from the 23rd of March last year. They have been remarkably innovative in dealing with the most trying circumstances. And if anything gives me hope for the future, it's the fact that that spirit exists within the organisation that I run.
Brilliant. Claire, thank you so much. I'm now going to talk to Alice and we'll come back to you and join into the wider discussion. Thank you. Alice.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Extraordinary times for local authorities. You've had to create brand new services throw them together with massive distractions, yet things haven't gone away. The issues that were here before the pandemic, they're still here today, aren't they? How's that been as a senior officer in a local authority? What's that journey been like? Because it's very difficult to know, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting back, well, almost a year ago now, aren't we? But last spring, it was bonkers. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was really quite stressful. I mean, more so for other colleagues than myself, actually, the people who had to find a mortuary, just start a mortuary and get staff to handle all of that, which is not straightforward or easy, is it? It's not a job you really want to volunteer for. But the food banks, the emergency payments, all the care homes, the PPE, it was astonishing, really. But I think it does demonstrate the resilience and skills and ambitions of local government that many local councils absolutely, I mean, they're great in an emergency. They stepped up to the mark. We had volunteers, well, staff who were volunteering to ring round all the shielding people to see if they needed food and to get that going. As I said, to work in the mortuary and to do all sorts of things. It's quite phenomenal. And I think it does show how local authority as a organisation that's close to the ground and knows its community can really step up to a crisis and step in and help. I mean, we didn't wait for the government to provide PPE for our care homes. We went out and bought it. We used our reserves because that's what reserves are for, a crisis. And we just got and consequently, actually, as a result of that, we didn't have a particularly high rate of deaths in our care homes, although Brent was very, very badly affected in the first wave. It was one of the highest in the country, I think, for admissions and death rates at the time. But yeah, and at the same time as all of that, we're still trying to get on with the day job of getting our local plan in place, delivering new homes and commercial floor space and dealing with planning applications, apprenticeships, etc.
My experience of working with Brent on the sort of core services is that we've noticed just a very small blip in that sort of first maybe 4 or 5 weeks. I think all over the country, planning officers were carrying parcels to people's houses because that was the immediate reaction. But they were soon back delivering virtual meetings and everything else. Do you think that the process of planning and delivering houses had much of a hiccup, or were you able to keep that machine going?
We were pretty able to keep the machine going, actually. I mean, again, lots of organisations adapted the way they worked, but it's the way everything went online so quickly. We do so many virtual site visits now, and why would you go back to not doing that, I suppose? We posted out site notices for applicants to put up, so that didn't stop. But the move to virtual committees, so there was a bit of a sort of moment at the beginning, but then it did, as you said, it did quite quickly settle down and it's business as usual. I mean, this is not to do with strategic applications or public-private partnerships, but we did notice and still have noticed a massive increase in householder applications and enforcement complaints. I think because people were at home and thought, I need a bigger house, I need an office, I need a garden shed, and also we're looking out their windows thinking, I'm sure that's not authorised, I'm going to get onto enforcement. So that's the workload there in those areas has noticeably increased over the course of this pandemic.
Now, there's a lot of talk about the financial implications, and there are various degrees of reality to that, where local authorities lost all their car parking income. There were some really major implications of the lockdown. But there are other issues about policy, about the fact that people were living in their homes and having to work in their homes. What do you think the legacies are going to be from your side of what you've confronted and had to deal with on planning issues? Is there going to be a change? Are you going to be looking for something different? Are you going to start saying, don't give me that, don't give me that, bring this forward?
Yeah, I think it's still early days in that thinking. The one, I think, immediate thing which has come to the fore is access to open space. And now I know all new developments have to have there are measures, aren't there, or standards for access to private open space and public open space. But certainly the value of parks and open spaces, which have historically been underinvested in quite significantly over sort of the past, I suppose, austerity years and things, and that has completely come up the agenda. And we are now reinvesting in the parks actually to improve the sort of conditions and make them pleasanter places for people to be, because we've realised, you know, pandemic or no pandemic, the value of outdoor spaces and all of that. So that's one thing. But in terms of the, you know, there's a whole thinking through about town centres. Obviously, there are loads of webinars on that, aren't there, on high streets and things. In Brent, because we don't particularly, we haven't really got department stores. I think we've got a Peacocks in Harlesden, which is closing, and we've got a couple of Argoses around the place, but we haven't got a Debenhams that's empty. We haven't got a John Lewis that's closed. So we haven't got a hole in our high streets in that sense. And in many respects, our local high streets have thrived because of the local nature of things.
Yeah.
So we are looking and thinking about, if people aren't going to be commuting into central London every day, if offices don't want to be in central London anymore, whether we've got a outer London borough offer, because Brent's got fantastic transport connections. I think we've got 27 stations or something in the borough, one of the highest in London. So we're starting to do that thinking, definitely, but I think we're not quite there yet, as in having a finished product of what we want to achieve.
Well, thank you. And it just goes to the breadth of thinking that's having to go into where we go further. I'm going to come back to you, Alice. I'm going to go to Kate, if I may now, and we'll be back with you in a second. Kate, thank you for joining us. Claire sort of alluded to the journey that housing associations have been on, and that journey. How does it feel from your perspective and your organisation? Because you're also quite involved with student accommodation as well, so you've got quite a diverse. I'm just pulling that out a little bit, where the students fit into the communities.
Yeah, good point. I'll come to students in a minute, and obviously I'd reinforce a lot of what Claire said. I'll try not to repeat what she said. I mean, it's the pandemic has been experienced by many of us as a kind of almost complete breakdown of our normal lives. It's been, you mentioned yourself, the issue of mental health. And I think, you know, for anybody who's running an organisation, that has had a tremendous impact. We've kept things going, we've used Zoom and all of the rest of it. But what has it done for our basic social lives, our family lives, our work lives? It's had an enormous effect, psychologically and socially. And I think that is the most damaging thing. We haven't really thought through how that's going to come through. But I mean, that's how it feels for me. I feel I've been under house arrest for a whole year, and I've had enough of it. And I'm really missing my tribe. I'm missing my family. I'm missing London life. You know, the whole thing is really negative, a very negative experience. And that's completely apart from people, you know, dying and being ill and losing friends and family, which is also really awful. But, you know, for the mass of people, it's that sense of social isolation and atomization. I think it's been really fundamental. The students is an interesting subject. I was kind of going to say, don't get me started, because it's a particular scheme we're having some problems with. And we've got Councillor Steve coming on in a few minutes, and he and I have talked about this. But the basic student situation, of course, is that many people have got their young students at home working, you know, in the back bedroom on Zoom. They're not having the student experience, which is, of course, the most important thing about going to university, isn't it? It's going out, having drinks, meeting new people, learning new things, being independent, being experimental. This is denied to people. So it's a really appalling student experience for most people, just focusing on reading books and preparing for exams. That's not what it's about, not in my opinion. But the student accommodation will come back as soon as the universities come back. And I mean, ours is empty at the moment because of building safety issues. But many of the students have been getting discounts from the suppliers, which is the right thing. But obviously it does make you wonder about the whole question of who's going to go out of business as a result of COVID and who's going to stay in business is a great big question. And I think we can be pretty sure that the local authorities and the housing associations, we're going to stay in business. We're going to be here tomorrow. But a lot of businesses and products and lifestyles as we know it are going to disappear. And that's before we even talk about Brexit, which I won't.
No, you didn't at all. You never mentioned that word. That was beautifully just dropped in there. We'll see whether that comes back later. the big thing, I'm certainly aware that everyone has had to deal with the Hackett report, and I think that the housing associations have been brilliant in they've looked at this massive issue, and I've not heard anyone be anything other than what can we do about it and how can we deal with it. That, how big a break is that on going forward? Is that really stifling confidence in investing?
I think it's essential. I mean, COVID, we're trying to keep our staff and our tenants safe, and we've got building safety. The whole of my life at the moment is about safety instead of growth and new homes for homeless people, which have been my previous life. Now I'm just really worrying about safety. So it's completely taken over. That's what my job is now. And so the building safety is of obviously great concern. It is quite a London problem or a city problem, because it's about high rise mainly and flatted developments. People who've got stock all over the country, like Clare, obviously are affected, but we're in London, we've got a lot of high rise buildings. And the safety of those buildings is very, very important for the people who live in them, whether they're owners or they're renters. So the Hackett proposals are all positive, completely support them, and I support everything that's happening. But we have been faced with the question about who pays. So the places where we've been looking for who pays, it's the people who built them in the first place. It's the government who created the environment in which perhaps the standards weren't as high as they should be, and potentially the person who lives there, the leaseholder. And so there's a lot of discussion about who pays, with also an expectation of us as the landlord, should we pay as well? So I think the answer is there will be payment from all four parties, and how that goes forward is obviously a subject for discussion. We have found many of the developers have been pretty positive. Some have walked away and been appalling, but many have been very sensible and good. The leaseholders are very worried about the scale of the bills. Yeah. The government has put some money on the table and we'll try and get it. It seems to be very, very slow. We bid several months ago. We hardly know if we're going to get some money. So that's a big piece of work. Does it detract from new build? Yes, of course it does.
And that's one of the challenges. Okay, Kate, absolutely lovely. And the issue about the mental health issue, I think, is a through line that we'll go through. But let's bring on Councillor Steve, and we'll be back with you in a second. Everyone has had an extraordinary journey, and then there's being the leader of a council and the voice of a community, with the buck stopping at you, Councillor Steve. I like the idea of calling you Councillor Steve, by the way.
It's a bit weird, actually. It's normally Steve or Councillor Cohen. Steve's much nicer, I think, especially on Friday, and it's a lovely sunny day. So,
what's the journey been like for you?
I mean, I share all the experiences of what people have already said. It's been very difficult, very challenging. Staff have been amazing. Commitment from the communities has been terrific. And I think the whole thing around communities changed. It's almost, we've gone back 30 or 40 years in this country, and that community spirit is back and alive and well. And I think we've got to harness that going forward. We can't lose it. We can't let that just fritter away and not build on it. So we faced all the challenges that, as I say, that's already been talked about today. As far as going forward, which is what I'm doing now, and we're concentrating on how we're going to get through the next year and the following years. We've got the mayoral elections in May. We've then got local elections in May 2022. So in political terms, it's not long. So we're concentrating on delivering what we said we'd do in 2018. So we said we'll build over 1,000 council homes, and we're on target to do that. We said we'd have 5,000 affordable through private sector housing associations, etc. We'll probably be a bit shy on that figure, maybe by 1,000. But considering we've gone through COVID for a year, I think that we've still got a good return. And the appetite's there, I think, for growth and development in Hounslow, certainly from the council's point of view. And I know from the conversations I have with housing associations and developers, people are still very keen to come to Hounslow and develop.
Now, that 1,000 homes that you said, council homes, they're funded by you?
Yeah, through the HRA.
That's brilliant. And is that a sign of that's a route that you're going to go further? Because it's something
Yeah,
that I
well,
know that Alice will talk about when we.
2000, I think we had 500 in the previous administration, so we upped the ante. So we've got 1,000 to hit. We'll be over the 1,000. We'll probably be 1,300, something like that. So, and that's mainly, some of them are on infill sites, garage sites, etc. So we've had a lot of support from the LGA on that. Sorry, the GLA. So the mayor's been very supportive. And that they're for local people, local council rent. So that was a commitment we made in our manifesto in 2018. So I'm very pleased we'll do that. So I think because of COVID, probably it's put back development by about 3 months. But all our main developers, whether it's Ballymore or Barratt, they're on site. They're cracking on with doing what they said they were going to do. So we're very pleased. And next week, we should receive our first outcome of our first ballot for a regeneration scheme in Brentford. So hopefully that will go well. So we've not put the brakes on as far as building new homes. It's what makes us tick in Hounslow.
Well, that's very good. And everyone's going to be very cheerful and just getting your telephone number now. The issue that I do want to just we talked about housing associations and what they've been going through. There is another dynamic, which is employment and the overall economy, not just the housing economy. And that is a real challenge, isn't it, for you in the next few years?
Well, it is in Hounslow and in West London because of the demise of the aviation industry. You see, they posted with £2 billion.
Yeah, amazing.
This week. We've got a huge increase on people on universal credit, huge increase in people on furlough, and if and when that comes to an end, we'll see, I think, a spike in unemployment, particularly in the west of the borough, because those people predominantly will work in the supply chain for Heathrow, and it's predominantly affecting women and young people under 25. So there's some real problems we've got to face and challenges. We set up our recovery board, pandemic recovery board last year, and it was a task and finish board. It sat for about 5-6 months, and we had developers on there. We had other private sector, we had other public sector as well. So we've approved our recovery plan, and we're now putting the meat on the bones and start delivering on that. I sit on the mayor's jobs and skills board. So we had a meeting on that yesterday. So we're pushing ahead with the new jobs to fill the gaps we've got, particularly around the supply chains for Heathrow. So it's about what are the green jobs, what are the green industries, what they really look like. We do a lot of talking about them, and people seem a bit obsessed with retrofits going to save the world. I'm not sure it will. And in the next week, we're going to go with our first 5 passive council houses to the planning committee.
Steve,
so we're testing water there.
That is the perfect moment to invite everyone else back to join us, I think, is let's talk about going forward and what those opportunities are and the barriers.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Don't you go away. You're not allowed to go away. I think that one of the things that interests me is you've built 1,000 homes out of your HRA, and Alice, you're building homes under your own steam, and this is about public-private partnership. So what is the opportunity, and how do the housing associations play their role, which I thought was a very powerful point made by Kate, is that we've yet to see the fallout of who survives and who doesn't survive in the private sector, which I don't know whether we've made half of our viewers feel a bit queasy about that comment. But where do we go forward from the local authority side? You're already doing stuff, so how do we all join in on that bandwagon? How do we get behind you and do more? Alice?
Yeah, so we similarly, like as Councillor Curran explained, we've got an ambitious sort of council house building programme, similar numbers as well, 1,000 council homes, 5,000 affordable homes over a 5-year period. And again, we're also on track with that. So there are a number of different ways that we do it. So, we are doing a lot ourselves. We procure contractors or the design team, and we just get on site and build them, and they are for our tenants. And so that isn't in partnership with anybody, it's just us with a contractual relationship with a supplier, I suppose. But we have a strategic partnership with Network Homes, because they're the biggest housing housing association in our borough, but we also have Notting Hill Genesis and Clarion also in the borough. So we have a relationship with a lot of them, but we have a strategic partnership with Network Homes. We also have LLP on one site, which hasn't actually got on site yet, and it's a bit of a rocky road, but it is trying out different forms of sort of public-private partnerships, isn't it? In South Kilburn, which is our estate regeneration area, where we are about halfway through the delivery of just over 3,000 homes altogether, so doubling the number of homes on there. But the relationship we have there is like a three-way thing, because we take a scheme through to planning permission and then we seek a developer partner, so we do a developer agreement, and part of that will be the involvement of a registered provider, which usually comes via the relationship which the developer has with an existing registered provider. But we are actually looking as to whether the council should step in there and be the registered provider for our own sites or our own tenants. So there's a bit of a mixed economy there. So yeah, a few different models really that we're exploring.
And in a way, I sense that you're challenging all opportunities for informed housing, and a little bit of competition there for Claire and Kate there, being your own.
Yeah, that's true. But I would like to emphasise that it's not just about housing; it is about places and communities, and I'm sure everyone else will agree. But sometimes it does feel like it's a race for the numbers, but actually, all of us in the school will know that there's a much more of a holistic placemaking community approach to these developments.
Yeah, well, I think Claire, that plays very much to your view of what you feel after the last year. The challenges of we talk about public-private partnership. There's a quasi partnership between yourselves and local government, which is not in that level. How easy is all of that to make work? Particularly as I know that your background is governance and everything, and delivering all those sort of projects with complex relationships. Are they as easy as just going alone, or do they bring the value that everyone wants them to bring? And what makes a very successful partnership?
I'm just not sure that going alone is any longer an option, frankly, in most places, even on the very smallest sites. The truth of the matter is you get a much better outcome if you take the local stakeholders with you. And in most instances, that is the local authority. Can I just say a few words about competition? I mean, there's no shortage of demand for social housing in this country. So the more players, the better, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. I have absolutely no issue with local authorities doing things that we have traditionally done, because if we can all increase the output, that has got to be a much better outcome. I mean, I have experiences around the country, lots of different local authorities and lots of different approaches to it. For an organisation like us that wants to operate at scale, many of the sites that we're exploring, we will buy the land up front and then we will create the partnerships around it. But that, it's certainly not beneath us to purchase a Section 106 site for a few homes in a place, if that makes sense as well. So I think, from my point of view, I don't have an ideological preference for one thing or the other. My biggest motivation really is to make sure that we use the resources of my organisation to best effect to get as many homes built as possible.
And the placemaking aspect of what Alice was saying, that's become more important, and you're more aware of that.
It's hugely important, Nick. And the organisation I run tracks its roots back to William Sutton, and those of you who know the old William Sutton estates will know that the trustees there were as engaged about public space and private outdoor space in the early 1900s as we are today. And the strength of those estates is they are still occupied and still very much valued today.
Yeah. Kate, the public space, the placemaking goes to healthy mental mind and health, doesn't it, really? And that has really been brought home, those challenges. What's your experience in recent years? Are there projects you now look back at that you would now tackle differently from what you've learned from the COVID experience?
Oh, interesting. I mean, I think the question, people have already mentioned it. We go to work in an office and then we go home to have a home life. Well, that's been smashed, hasn't it, by COVID? So now people are working from home. So if you've got a spare bedroom, as I have, here I am in it, or you've got some outside space or a shed when the weather, weather gets a bit better, you're a lot better off than someone who's sharing a bedroom, somebody who's, young people living together in a house where they don't have any private place to work. So the world really is divided into the haves and the have-nots about whether you've got gardens and space or not. And most social tenants are lucky if they have a balcony. Although, as Alice completely correctly said, we don't build them anymore without balconies. But there are some people living in egg boxes at the moment, and that is unbearable, particularly if you get sick, and you're crammed in. I think overcrowding has really helped COVID. COVID likes a nice overcrowded council flat or housing association flat, so it has brought it into question. But then equally it's asked us, do we really need all these offices? I saw a planning permission going in for a huge new big block of flats, and I'm thinking, does that make any sense? There'll be a lot of empty stock. So the bringing together of work and home is a huge issue for town planning, for people envisaging the future, for people building homes now, I think. And in London, it's quite pertinent. Are people going to want to live in the city of London or the centre of London? Are the outskirts like Hounslow and Brent, more attractive perhaps than some of those inner areas if people have a bit more garden or a bit more space? Or are they even wanting to go outside London and go to places that with a 2-hour commute because they're only coming in once or twice a day? I mean, Alice said it's too early to say how we're going to live, but I think it's pretty certain that the London and major cities designed by the Victorians, tinkered with in the 1930s, are not really built for tomorrow's world. And the way we build and create communities in the future is a question we still have to answer. But I hope at the heart of it, it's humans, with their social and emotional needs, families, ordinary people, working people, how we find a way of creating communities that work for them. And that's a big task for all local authorities and housing associations, but also the private sector needs to be very aware of this. It isn't simply a matter of just banging up big blocks of flats or big office buildings and just hope that they'll work. The whole question of transport, how we use it, technology, it's all up in the air and it's all exciting. These are exciting new possibilities, but they need big thinkers, visionaries who've got some of the ideas, of the future.
Let me take that straight back to big thinkers and visionaries. Steve, you and I have known each other for long enough that this is the world that you've always cared about. You've always been passionate about your communities and everything else. I'm not just being nice to you. It's one of the most infectious, you only have to meet you for about 5 minutes and you know exactly what the world's about. And it's why you're in politics. Taking back this opportunity of creating place and homes that are meaningful for people, I sense that there's a bit of your role is to become an orchestra conductor of many different suppliers of opportunities and solutions. How's the private sector going to talk to you differently? What do you want to get from the private sector when you're going to work in partnership? What makes a partner for you?
Someone that shares my views and values, and lots of the developers do, and lots of the housing associations do. That's why we have so much development going on in Hounslow. That's why we've been successful, certainly since we came back into office in 2010. No one can say that there's a problem developing in Hounslow. It's the opposite. My biggest concern at the moment isn't the amount of pushback I'm getting from local residents and communities about why are you still building more homes? Well, because we've got a borough that's expanding. We've got nearly 300,000 people in it. We'll see what the census tells us after, later in the year. But so we do need more homes. Place, as everyone says, really important. It's one of the first things we think about now when we're looking at developments. What's the place element? What are the job opportunities for local people carrying out local jobs rather than going into town? So we have a big influx of people. We did pre-COVID along the A4 corridor. That's, we got offices like Smith Klein, hardly occupied. If you look at the Golden Mile, we've got a glut of empty offices there anyway before COVID.
Yeah.
What worries me is permitted development.
Yeah.
And what comes in, if it's a good one, it's great. If it's not, it's awful. And we've seen that in other boroughs. And then the place is even more important then, because they weren't built there, those buildings, because they had the place in mind. They were for people to go to and leave from, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it's how you curate the place around those people and those good transport connections, and more importantly, those good walking and cycling connections to our town centres. So if you look at Brentford, Ballymore are doing a great job on the south side. We've got to look at the other side of the high street now. But if we get all of these people living in these office blocks, what's the offer for them coming into Brentford town centre? So there's a lot to think about over the next few years. But we mustn't stop building new homes. We can't let all of these problems stop us from carrying on. What we must do is build new homes, because we mustn't forget we had the housing crisis before COVID. I think, as people have already said on the call, it overcrowding, multiple generational households. We've got some of the highest rates still in London, in the west of our borough. A lot of that is because of multi-generational households. HMOs is another big problem that's coming back. So there's a lot to deal with, but we can help relieve some of that pressure by building good, sustainable homes. And I think certainly people I know around this room, in this room, that's what they're up for.
No, and we do have, I think we've probably got the most like-minded people we could possibly put on a panel. One of the things, Alice, we talked about the public in Brent. I love working in Brent. I love working in housing, but sometimes I'm not quick enough to get into the planning committee fast enough. They're so efficient in doing their job. If we've communicated and talked to the public and done our job, they make decisions about homes. It's very serious. But you were saying that, even in Brent, you've got a job to do with the public that are there. And tell me a bit about that, because I think that's an issue that Steve's got to bring his community along. You've got the same issue, really, haven't you?
Yes, I think it's common the country over. People don't like change. People quite like the way, a lot of people quite like the way they live and the facilities they've got. So when we do have a planning application for a tall building, we're granting consent for sort of buildings of 15 stories up to sort of 26 stories. Because we can't go out, because we don't have the land footprints to go out, so we have to go up to get the housing that we need, and people don't like it. Lots of people just don't like tall buildings, and they don't like seeing the new additional homes coming in. They're worried about the impact on traffic congestion and parking. They just think it's too many people, and they worry about doctor surgeries and schools, even though our school place planning tells us we just don't need any more schools. We've got enough places certainly within our primary schools. We've got a new secondary school coming on stream quite soon. So people are very reluctant, and I think it's one of the jobs of the planners and the decision makers and people like Steve to think about the future communities. I very much want somebody to be the voice of the people who don't live there yet, to enable them, to have a choice, hopefully a choice of where they live, and to live in good quality developments. And quite frankly, if that means an existing resident has to spend 10 more seconds at a mini roundabout in their car, well, okay, we're not going to stop granting planning permission for new homes because somebody doesn't like extra cars on the road.
That's and I think that's welcome, because it is a challenge, and people do have to say it is as it is, or we won't get anywhere. Claire, we haven't talked about climate change and decarbonisation, the other big challenge for people who are sitting on housing stock already. But I also wanted to just touch on we haven't talked about government and this partnership, and there's been a plethora of new white papers, green papers, laws that suddenly disappear. Government wants to be seen to be doing something. It feels a need to be seen to do. Actually, should it relax and maybe take a chill pill and get out of people's way? Or is there, what do you need from government?
so I'm always inclined not to legislate, because I think that, you know, most policy initiatives can be driven through because the arguments themselves are persuasive and you can nudge behaviours. Legislation always comes with unintended consequences, but from time to time there is obviously a case for legislation. I think one of the things that bedevils housing associations is the need for policy stability. And every national administration that comes in feels a need to just tinker and tweak and to adjust because they're not entirely happy with the way things are. And that is always quite difficult, particularly where those adjustments fundamentally affect our income streams or our ability to forecast. And those things are really important and really sensitive. So, you know, I'm all in favour of well thought through legislation, but, you know, my inclination would be to use that as a last resort.
Kate, government, what can they do? Relax, move out of the way, let you get on with it?
You know, what I would really like is politicians who lead from the front and say we need more housing. That's what I would like. A political campaign or government that says, yes, let's make this happen. People like Steve, you know, in government would be great. And I've met quite a lot of chancellors and prime ministers over the years. And I can't say in my lifetime I've ever met one who has this vision of building more homes, affordable homes for people. That would be the best thing they could do to make it a priority. And it just doesn't seem to be one. It's not something that they really get. They don't see the value of it. Of course, the value is that people are well housed, then a lot of other problems go away. Of course, the value is, you know, it means that wages aren't under constant pressure if people have got a reasonable rent to pay rather than ridiculous rents that they're having to pay. It has implications for health. It will be good for the economy. It'll be good for jobs. It'll be good for the environment. You know, there's so many positives about having a strong, driven, you know, program of house building that we've seen at various times in British history. And I think the time for that is now.
Thank you. Steve, I'll let you come in on the government thing because, you know, you're taking direct action, you're writing to the government, you're letting them know what they need to do. But also, what are the barriers to social housing, the delivery of it? I don't hear that there are any. It's about driving all the routes to deliver rather than focusing on any one. And the private sector has a role in that as well as your own role.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said earlier, my biggest problem is trying to convince local communities and residents that we need more housing, especially social housing or council housing. But, you know, we made a political commitment to do that. I'm sure as we draw up our manifesto for 2022, there will be another housing target in there, one for us to build and one for other parties to build. So it's really important to us. And as Kate said, you know, good homes make good people, good families, good jobs. The economy improves. You know, we've unfortunately got a Debenhams that's gone west in Hounslow, and it was in west of the borough. So that's gone. So the effect on our high streets is really difficult at the moment. Even sunny, leafy Chiswick is suffering in the high street, although the flower market was seen as best in class by the High Street Task Force recently in the report. So and we've supported that. So there are little gems out there, but we've got to all be rowing in the right direction and tinkering with the planning process. I don't think adds anything really. I really am against permitted development. I think it doesn't work. It doesn't work for individual residents in you know, with HMOs and all those sorts of things. And it doesn't really help the planning system. I think leave it alone. We've got what we've got. Let's work with it. I'm all for speeding things up. I'm all for cutting out bureaucracy, but adding more in hasn't worked, I don't think, and it won't work. It just delays everything. So we put in our local plan reviews. That's gone off to the inspector. We want to crack on and build more homes. It's very simple. Let us do it. Give us the money. Let us do it.
Okay, and money is the sort of crux of it. So for the private sector to work with you and the housing associations here it's a collaboration, bring forward ideas, bring forward schemes, let's all work together and we can make things happen. Is that your overall advice to everyone?
Yeah, well, we already have, and we've got a great relationship with Kate, with Notting Hill Genesis, A2 Dominion, Shepherd's Bush, Network Housing, you know, the list goes on of the people we work with on a daily basis. So we are an attractive borough to build in. So come along. If anyone's on the call, give me a call.
Very good. Alice, what would be the climate change? Does that concern you, or is that just another thing that's on the list of things that you've got to resolve? And what would you be saying to the private sector to engage with Brent?
Does climate change worry me? Yes, as an individual. In terms of work, yeah, you know, developers are embracing it. They know, you know, for major developments, they've got to be zero carbon, and mostly they're cracking on with that. So, well, they don't have a choice. So yeah, so that's all happening, and of course, you know, Brent, like lots of places, have declared a climate change emergency. So we've got a draft action plan, and in our own procurement in our own buildings, for new buildings, it's you know, there are standards and requirements to be as low carbon as possible. That's new stuff though. It's a retrofitting, as I think somebody else said, which is a real challenge of existing stock. If you want to work with us, well, you know, come on in. I mean, we are doing quite a lot of work around our procurement to support small and medium enterprises, because most of Brent's businesses are. So we do quite a lot of work. We do meet the buyer events. We do some training webinars on the procurement process and how to get involved. I mean, we use frameworks, so I'm sure there's a work somewhere on our website which tells you how to get onto a framework if you want to, or when the doors open again for that. If you know, if you're interested in big stuff and relationships, then yeah, just get in touch and give us a call. Might not have something that works, but you know, you never know, we might.
Okay, Kate. Going forward, we've talked about government, we've talked about the challenges. What is exciting for you? Getting out there again and re-engaging with people in general. But what's the big thing that you're going to want to make happen in your organisation going forward?
It is really an exciting and interesting moment. And I'm sure it's the same for you, Nick, and everybody else in the room. You know, we're used to doing business with people in person, you know, and going to look at a site and, you know, meeting people who already live there and looking at plans together and seeing how motivated people are, getting teams together where creativity can start flowing and challenging each other, meeting people from completely different industries who stimulate your thinking. All of that feels like it's been missing. I feel like I've been walking around with blinkers on instead of with, you know, 360 vision. And so that's the most exciting thing. I think creativity will really flow when we start coming back together. And it's just that opportunity to have a drink with someone, have a coffee, have a meal, have a, you know, an incidental meeting where I bump into someone on the tube. You know, these things happen in real life. And it's so exciting. I mean, I've been managing in quite a sort of top-down way, which I don't really love. I enjoy walking around and bumping into people. So that'll be great to come back to. I think there is going to be an outflowing of creativity and a sort of, should we do it in a new way? But also there will be lots of negatives and lots of repairing to do and lots of holding people together and putting our arms around things. It'll still be tough. But I think there will be a sort of 1920s effect. I've certainly been looking on the websites for a flight I'm going to take to Spain, and you know, people will want to go out and have a blooming good time. So hopefully that will help, you know, rebuild the town centres and the hospitality industry and the travel industry, because these are jobs for people and these are what give us, you know, some pleasure in our life, not just work and looking after the family. You know, there's another side to life. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think there should be a strong bounce back, and I hope that we can go forward, you know, enthusiastically into the future.
Thank you, Claire. I think that going forward, everyone's convinced here that there is lots to be done. you all agree. I was waiting for someone to fall out with each other. I'm going to get complaints. It wasn't exciting enough. But the great thing is there is a belief that the way forward, and let's get on with it. There is a sense of the humanity of life has really come home, and all of you have adopted that and said about it. For you in the next few months, bringing your teams back together, because you and I had a meeting in your offices. I think we were the only one.
I know, yes.
And it was very odd, wasn't it? What's your sort of call to arms now for your team, and what do you hope that people will be seeing?
So I agree with Kate and the sentiment about, wanting to reach out and talk to people and be in the same room as people, that's all really important. But I would also hope we hold on to some of what we've learnt over the last 12 months. So, we have learnt to be a bit more relaxed, haven't we? Some flexibility around our working days. I can imagine when I was young and had young children, that sort of flexibility would have been brilliant for me. I actually left the private sector because that sort of flexibility wasn't available to me. So I think there are some things that we should hold on to and try and encourage. But nonetheless, like Kate, I think my balance, my natural inclination is to want to see people.
Yeah. A question has just come through, and I do want to actually just end with that. So do you think, because you're all from local government or the housing association world, that the private sector shares the understanding of where we've come from? We've got there's a unanimous feel of learning here. Do you think the private sector gets it as well, Claire?
I really do, yes. From my supply chain, I would say most of those who work with us feel exactly the way we do about communities, and the experience we have all been through has been, it has bound us together.
Alice?
I think on the whole, yes. I mean, they're very good at coming in and being quite convincing about your investment in the community and placemaking, etc., etc. I doubt whether it's completely universal across some of the house building developers, but the ones we deal with, they're pretty much on board. Yeah,
cool. So. Kate?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand ESG and you go around calling people the wrong names and so on, it is going to have financial consequences. So the private sector is certainly learning this stuff, and that's right. But I mean, they understand, as we do, that doing things well is important if you want to make profits. We, as housing associations, we have to make money, but we want to make money in a way that is sustainable and will carry on in a positive way. And I think the best private sector companies absolutely get that. I did mention some of the coming back to fix inherent problems in the buildings. That's very costly for those private house builders and so on. But they know their reputation is very important, and reputation and profit are obviously linked without a doubt. But I think just sort of pure, unadulterated, build them high and sell them cheap stuff, those days have gone. You have to have the bigger picture. And there is much more closeness, I think, between the private sector, the housing associations and the local authority than there's ever been. And that's all to the good, as others have said, because we have different skills. We bring different things to the party. And as Claire correctly said, there isn't it isn't one person going out and doing it. We have to work together to achieve anything really that's significant at the moment. So the sooner we understand each other and play to each other's strengths, the better.
Thank you for that. Steve, a final question has just come through, which is about the crisis. Has the crisis highlighted the real challenges facing the lower paid? Could you wrap that up in your your thoughts on, has the private sector got the idea as well as we have?
Well, we encourage all of the private sector companies that we deal with, we expect them to be paying the London living wage. So through our companies, we've got several. We've just brought in our leisure services, our parks, etc. When Carillion went bust. So all those people have come back in. either directly into the council or back into our companies, and we're paying them the London living wage, we're paying them a reasonable pension and reasonable terms and conditions. So we would expect everyone to follow suit. I mean, not all councils, would you believe, even under the red flag, pay the London living wage to their third-party contractors. So I'll leave that hanging, but we do. It costs us money, but it's the right thing to do. The right thing to do. And if there's anyone who wants to come and develop in Hounslow or don't share those values, don't come. There's plenty of people knocking on the door that want to.
What I like about local government is you get straight talking, because I think I know where I stand with Alice, and I definitely now know where I stand with Steve. So thank you for that. Thank you to Kate and Claire, who are running extraordinary organisations. It's been a delight to chair this discussion with you, and I hope that the people watching have enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank
Lee,
you.
over to you.
Bye, thank you. Thanks so much, Nick. Thanks to our panel, an absolutely superb discussion. I think you covered so much. So, clearly we've got a housing crisis. We've got a great need for social housing. And I know, clearly there's the challenges from the Hackett report, sustainability challenges. But I think we've clearly got a very enlightened panel here today. I loved what you guys were saying. I think what Claire was saying about getting back to the charitable mission was really, really important. And the extent to which housing associations really do go, it's far more than just providing the social housing itself, and the focus that you all had on the community and on placemaking. And, going back to what you said about the early 1900s, when perhaps that was more of a priority, it's almost like, how many lessons do we have to learn to get the message that what we need to do? But I hope people have learned their lesson, and I hope this is a priority going forward. And I think we all agree that it is. I know, absolutely fascinating, some great inputs, and yeah, thank you all so much indeed. So thank you to our panel. And I'm just, for people listening today, just want to remind you of our next event. So on March the 10th will be our second event on the road to COP26 on reduce, recycle, regenerate. So really looking forward to that. We're also going to start a series of mini lectures, our city lectures, which will be starting in the next few weeks. And we've got lots more coming up. So thank you very much to our speakers, to Nick, to Kratos, and thank you all for listening. And don't forget, you can watch again on demand. And also don't forget to connect, keep messaging within the community, and we'll update you as we add more functions to our community. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. From our family to yours. Goodbye.